when the show was starting that there are new statistics that show that pornography is on the rise in Kenya. Did somebody say woo? All right. And especially ladies. And so we want to explore that with our guest today. Probably just introduce yourself. Introduce yourself. Yeah, it's actually, good morning. It's Africa Midnight.
Good morning. My name is Margaret Mbode. I am a psychologist practicing with Family Wellness Center, and I am also a university counselor at the Technical University of Kenya.
All right. So, Margaret, I guess the first question I'll ask you, because people don't understand that porn can actually become an addiction. So let's start with that. So what is an addiction? Let's start there.
An addiction, and in our context today, when we are talking about addiction in pornography, we are talking about compulsive or compulsion, having a compulsion in viewing of pornographic material. And the compulsion is excessive in such a way that you're just pushed and pushed and pushed to want to watch or to view more and more of it. And when you're talking about addiction in general, we are basically talking about finding yourself in that condition where you're pushed to either use, if it is a substance, or to engage in an activity. And the key thing here is the need and the drive to want to either use it more or to want to watch or to view in case of pornography. Yes.
So I'm sure it doesn't, like, for example, for pornography, it doesn't just, there are different stages to it. It doesn't just, come like, today, boom, I'm addicted. So what are the stages so that guys can know when they're edging close to the cliff?
Well, thanks, Wills. When you're talking about addiction to pornography, and like you rightly put it, it's a process. You don't watch today and get addicted. You go through one phase to another and to another. And the first phase is the phase we call the early exposure. And what we are talking about here is, especially for those people who are exposed to pornography at a very early age. And the exposure here could be, through the internet, literally getting into pornographic sites. It could also be watching magazines that are porn related. It could also be, like the racy movies that you watch, and there's a lot of heavy sexual content. So what happens is that the earlier children or young people are exposed to pornography, the more it's likely to stick.
Okay.
And the more it's likely for them to pick up the habit, which is going to grow later in their adult life, leading towards addiction. The second phase is the addiction itself. And what we are saying here is the need to keep wanting to come back to watch more and more of the content. And by the time you remember, we said addiction, there is a compulsion. So it basically means you want to keep referring, you want to keep going back to your phone every so often. Whether you want it or not, the urge to go back is quite a lot, and it becomes sort of like a regular part of your life. You can't, for you're sort of like in your normal state when you're doing or when you're engaging in that.
So you don't see it as an addiction?
You don't see it as an addiction. It's more of, it becomes a part of your life. So it looks like it's a norm for you to watch porn. And then the third phase is what we call the escalation. And what is happening at the escalation is, before then, you would watch material that is really not as graphic.
Okay. But
when you're getting to the escalation phase, then you want more of the hard, if I can use that term, more of the hard graphic, the hard ones, and more of it and more of it. What gave you a thrill before, or what gave you the kick before, no longer does, and now you want something more heavy in terms of the content. And then the fourth phase is what we are referring to as the desensitization. And what happens here, you develop some numbness, and what you need to do at this phase is that the level, what gave you, like, let's say you could watch like for an hour in a day, or 2 hours or 3 hours in a day, that doesn't give you what you need. You're looking for more of the excitement, because the principle about addiction is when you develop what we would call like a tolerance level,
right,
where there's need and the urge and the desire for more and more of it, and then finally you have the acting out.
So now what you've seen,
yes,
now go and implement.
You see what happens, because you're already at the fourth stage of addiction. So now watching it doesn't give you the kick and the thrill that you need. You want to move from the screen and to move from the paper to the real world. And that's now where acting out, it means you have to go and look for someone. Right. And that's the final. And that's the highest of the level of the addiction stages. Yes.
Right. So according to this new report, why do you think that it says that it's more in women? Why is it that way?
I do not want to discredit that survey, because that survey is only for one site. Like, I was looking at it, and I'm not going to mention the site because I don't want to drive traffic to that site.
The ladies seem to be in agreement.
Yes, otherwise they are going to be going to that site tonight. So I'm not going to mention that, but I'm sure they've read about it.
Right.
In the real sense, use of pornography is more in men.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
The ladies are right. Okay.
In the real sense.
In the real sense.
Yes, it is more in men. And that's why, and the reason I'm saying this was a survey, it was to one site, but proper scientifically verifiable studies will look across and look at other variables. I am not sure about the variables that, because it was one site and it was their site. So again, I don't know how credible that is, but I don't want to throw punches into that survey.
They might have been trying to draw traffic, but anything is possible.
It could have been to draw the traffic. But in the real sense, men are consumers of porn more than women.
Why is this so? Is it just that men? Why men wako huku? So ni ukweli ama? All right, hold on. The ladies wanasema Samantha. All right.
The truth. Well,
hold on.
Let's be real here.
Right.
Let's be honest. We are talking about studies that are done in credible and using credible methodology. Tells us that about 68%. It's highest. They give a percent of about 68% for men and about 18% for women. So the truth is, it's higher for men than it is for women.
And the 68%, is it like an age? Because you talked about like if they're exposed at an early age, then it is more dangerous, I guess, for them to get addicted.
Okay.
Is there a specific age that is likely to be prone to this?
Yes, there's an age that is more at risk. And before I answer that question, this will explain why that age is probably the highest. The heaviest traffic to the porn site happens between midnight and 4 a.m.
Okay.
And yes, between midnight to about 4 a.m. So now the question, Wills, is who is awake at that time?
Who is awake at that time? Yes.
Who is awake at that time?
At least today we know they're watching to number 10 and it is 12:24. At least mnaona to number 10.
So that means the highest percentage is between the age of 18 and 30, and it can go down to below 18. Then that also explains it's a younger generation, so it's also more likely that they are awake at that time as opposed to those who are 50 and above. Because actually statistics show us the above 45, 46, 48, around there, the percent reduces of those who watch porn. And it is true, and it is scientifically proven that a lot of people who watch will be watching pornography at that time. This explains, and why are they at that time? One, pornography, unlike other addictions like alcohol and tobacco, is done in secrecy. And so it's likely for people to engage in that activity late in the night when, you know, you're thinking no one is watching, and no one is hearing that, you know, whatever video clips you are watching, as opposed to during the day, because probably you're at work, you're in school, you're in college, you know, it's less likely that you will watch that using your office computer or laptop. But at night, in the safety and the comfort of your room, that's when it's likely to happen because of the secrecy that surrounds pornography. Yes.
All right, so I want to see if there's anybody in the audience who has a question. Oh, you have a question? All right, come through.
Okay, I have one first simple question. Now, let's say, for instance, I'm not addicted, but let's say my parents work in a places where support such a character. They come early in the morning and leave at night when I'm going to school. Can that lead to me becoming a pornography addiction? And secondly, let's say, for instance, I'm married and I'm at the age of, let's say, 25, and I'm at some point having what we call inadequate sexual satisfaction. Can it lead to me being a pornography addictor?
No.
All right. I guess you can tackle those two first.
All right.
Yes.
Two questions in one. Thank you for your question. And I want to throw back this question to the audience, and especially because this is a young audience. What has your parents working late got to do with you watching porn at 1 a.m.?
See, I think where it's coming from is when the parents leave at night, yes? So it means that window that you're talking about between 12 and 4, wako peke yao nyumbani.
But even then, when your parent, and I'm not trying to make excuses for the parents here, but even then, at midnight to 4 a.m., ideally, what are we supposed to be doing? Even as a young person, you're supposed to be asleep. I mean, 1 a.m., you're watching something, it's a little on the offside. And this is where I would want to push it back to the young people. Yes, I understand when you talk about absent parents and the effect that absent parents have on young people. But on the other hand, you need to learn to take personal responsibility. If you have a phone, is it for that purpose? Or is it for a better use? And yes, as parents, when we leave young people, we leave them exposed. We leave them to be creative in probably negative ways or other curious ways of dealing with things. But then again, let's also learn. We need to learn to take personal responsibility of our actions as a young people. Secondly, your question borders more on what would be some of the causes of pornography. Talked about, that it borders a lot. Yes, and he talks about no satisfaction. It's the flip of it.
Okay.
Pornography addiction will actually lead to insatisfaction of a sexual relationship. And I'll explain this. when one is addicted to porn, because of the secrecy that comes with it, they tend to have less intimate relationships. Remember, again, the other effect that is associated with that is the fact that this person tends to take a lot of their time into watching or viewing pornography because of the escalation and the stages that we talked about. So the more time they spend with their addiction habit, the less time they spend in relationships. And that's what actually will lead to a relationship breakup. However, I know probably where his question is coming from. There are people who will argue that pornography helps them in their sexual relationship, that it helps. Can I explain this? That it helps. What is a risk about that? Because that is a myth. What is a risk about that is that continued consumption of pornography has an impact on intimate relationships. And I know you've heard of marriages that are breaking today because either of the spouse is addicted to porn. Because then the other thing about porn is that, you see, it impacts on the pleasure center in your brain. And what it does, the stimulation that you get from watching pornography is artificial. It's not true, it's not real, it's not natural. So what will happen when you meet a partner, you will not get the same level of stimulation. And that is, again, what will make it difficult for you to continue to enjoy an intimate relationship because you feel like you're getting less of the thrill and less of the stimulation. So the argument that porn helps, long-term use of it has more severe effects than the short-term effects.
All right. And all right, so maybe we'll hear from a lady. Is there any lady with a question? Why? The men are saying yeah. Let's give some. You have one. You don't have. Unataka kujidefend? All right. Let me come to you hapo hivyo.
Ladies are saying, we view but we don't practice. Sindio. To admit we view but we don't practice them. Sindio. Yeah.
That's one point. They view, but they don't practice.
Yes, thank you. I have one question. Now that I've talked about sexual addiction, sometimes back when I was going through social media, I made an article that was saying global warming has been the major cause of sexual immorality. So I wanted you maybe to explain something more about, because it was saying global warming, the heat that we have makes people mature at an earlier stage. That's why you have very young people at a very early stage. Yeah, so I wanted maybe her to expound. Then secondly, maybe now that they have realized we have more of people being addicted to sexual immorality, maybe she can tell us how can you advise somebody who is facing such conditions? Thank you.
All right. All right. So I guess, so true or false, is it true that you can watch and not practice? Or is it because you talked about the stages, so is it probably that they're in one stage that they haven't graduated to the last one, which is acting out?
Thanks for that. Remember, you start by viewing. And addiction develops from the first view. Because it is from the first view that you progress to the stages that we have talked about. So even though someone has not reached the level of acting out, you are at risk of getting there.
Right.
So for me, is if you're watching, then you know you stand the risk.
Right.
And let me say it here. Treatment for porn addiction or sex addiction is maybe much more severe in treating than alcohol or than marijuana. And the reason for that is that, remember, one, because of the shame and the secrecy associated with porn addiction, then it takes even a lot longer time for someone to go and seek for help. Because no one wants to be told. You know, alcohol, it's acceptable. I mean, it's legal to take alcohol. But when you're talking about porn, even your closest friend probably don't know that you're doing that. So it takes much longer for you to go and seek for help. And by the time you probably are seeking for help, you're already at stage 5, where now you're probably getting into acting out.
Right.
And with porn addiction comes with a very low sense of self-esteem. Because the other thing that comes with porn addiction is this thing that leaves you very conflicted, in the sense that you feel like you're living a double life.
Right.
Where on one side we see you like you have it all, but on the other side you know what you're doing when you're alone. And for that reason, then it is likely that it leads you into committing suicide. And we need to remember that.
Right.
Because of that feeling of emptiness, feeling of filth and dirt and worth, because of the two sort of kind of lives that you're living, a lot of people will want to commit suicide. So coming back to answer his question, I cannot speak with authority about the relationship between global warming and
maturing faster.
Yes, porn addiction.
Right.
But what I can say here is, if you look at the percent that we talked about in terms of the age group, then you realize some of the studies talk about 18, but I know some studies go below 18. And the question is, what is happening to young people from adolescence all the way to young adulthood? A lot of what is happening is trying to form and establish relationship with the opposite sex. And so they are sexually active.
Okay.
And that could explain. Yes.
All right, maybe finally, for those, you also asked an important question there about, okay, there are so many questions, but okay, maybe you can have what advice would you give to somebody who is addicted today and they're watching?
What I would say, the first thing is the effects are severe for porn addiction. There are psychological effects, there are emotional effects, and there are health effects. Porn has a relationship with depression. And you know depression, what it is? It's a disorder. So there is a very heavy relationship. There is also a relationship between porn addiction and developing of sexual disorders. You know, the ones we talk about, premature and all those, there is a very high relationship. The other thing I would like to tell young people, there are health risks that are associated with porn addiction. As you stimulate, so chances of infection, as you act out, that's when you get to engage with many sexual partners and in unsafe sex. So that increases chances of what? STI, hepatitis, anything that you can think about.
Right.
And thirdly, I don't know whether it's the third, it could be more than the third. And then the other thing is, it is an addiction like any other form of addiction that needs treatment. And the treatment would take a long time. It's easy to slip into it. It's very difficult to get out of it. So if you're doing that now, please seek help. Yes.
All right. So I'd like to say, all right, go ahead and clap then for And we'd like to say thank you so much for making time to come and expound on it. So what we're going to do is, as always, when we have a topic like this, we have her contacts and details. And you okay if we share if somebody who wants help? Yeah? All right, no, we'll share them. So you just reach out to us because, like you said, it's a private thing. You probably don't want the whole world to know. Just reach out to us on our individual. You can reach out to me at Willie Saburu or at Citizen TV Kenya. And then we're going to go ahead and reach out to her. And she'll reach out to you as well.
All right. Thank you. It was
right.
a pleasure.
Right.
Have a good morning and good day.
All right. So a round of applause for Margaret. All right. Thank you very much for coming through as well. So I hope that you have learned a few things looking at social media. I see you guys quoting most of the things that were being said. I hope that it's been an education for you.